Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to share with you how to can salmon. We recently got a bunch of meat from my in-laws who were getting rid of a freezer and needed to get rid of some of the meat. And so I took out a whole bunch of stuff, some bones, some fish, some roast, with the plan to can all of it. And so I'm progressively showing you how I can these things over a couple of weeks. I've already released the video on how to can bone broth and make your own bone broth, and this week's video is going to be how to can salmon. Now this salmon was previously frozen and defrosted. Now for us to can, these are the end pieces with the tails on, but there's still lots of good meat here. So we are going to can them in these pint jars. That is according to the specifications on the National Center for Home Food Preservation online. And my husband just cut these into longer strips that would sort of fit and pack these jars nice and tight. Now this is going to be raw packed, so there will be no added liquid, just the fish itself with a little bit of salt. And the National Center for Home Food Preservation specifies that you want to can them with the skin on the outer side. So you don't need to take any of the skin off, although I should note here that this fish was already eviscerated. When it was caught or very soon afterwards, we took out all of the organs and the blood. After he cut the strips and fit as much of the fish into these pint jars, you can see I'm getting rid of any of the excess blood that has come out in this process. The National Center for Food Home Preservation specifies specifically to remove the head, the tail, the fins, and any of the scales if you haven't already removed the scales when you've caught the fish. And then it says to wash and remove all of the blood. Now we're not really doing that, we're just packing them into the jars and then tipping them over, and that way all the excess blood and water can drain off that has come up in the defrosting. Now when all the fish was packed into these pint jars, I added 1 teaspoon of salt per pint jar without adding any liquid. They were just going to be processed like this. And then I wiped the lids with some vinegar just to make sure that they will have a good seal and that there's no oily or bloody bits on the top rinse which can prohibit a seal. And then I am sealing all of my jars with the canning lid and then the screw on top. Now the website notes that there could be glass-like crystals forming in canned salmon, and there's no way for a home canner to avoid these crystals from forming, but they'll usually dissolve when reheated, so they're completely safe to eat. This is our first time. We have not canned very much fish, and so I haven't seen this happen. I don't know how long it takes for it to happen, but this is a note, so I thought it's important that I include that in this video as well. And then I'm going to add these pint jars into my pressure canner. I place a rack at the bottom of the pot. Then I pour about 2 to 3 inches of hot water into the pot. I boil this in my kettle just to make it go faster. Pour that into the pot and then I add in my jars. We have an all-American pressure canner. The number is 921. It can fit about 6 quart jars with some pint jars at the top. There's an extra layer if you want to separate and have 2 layers going at the same time. I was able to fit all 9 pint jars into our pressure canner, and I did 2 layers, 6 at the bottom and 3 at the top. And then before I secure the lid on the canner, I use a rag and a little bit of olive oil just to rub on the seal and make sure that that metal-to-metal seal will be well lubricated and not get stuck. And then I secure the lid onto the canner at this specific notch. You'll see there's an arrow pointing to a little groove in the middle, and then this little lip that hooks underneath this metal part. And then I start tightening up the bolts. You'll see I grab the opposite ends and then I'm just lightly tightening them initially and then going back a second time and tightening the bolts really tightly, making sure that the lid is tightening to the base evenly all around. And then I turn on the heat and let the pot come up to a boil. And how I know that's happening is when there is a stream of steam coming from this vent pipe. As soon as I see steam coming out, I turn on my timer for 10 minutes and make sure that that steam is running continuously for 10 minutes before I add the weight. I grab this all-American canner pressure cooker instruction booklet every time and read through this one page that just explains it really simply, and then I make sure that I follow these steps just to familiarize myself with it as I start canning. No matter what canner you have, Make sure that you are following their canning instructions, read carefully, and follow all of the steps to make sure that you are doing this in a safe manner. That's what I'm doing here, and so I'm giving you the instructions from my canner, which may be different from your canner, so make sure that you're consulting your canner's manual. Now you should check on the FDA website to make sure what weight to use for whatever elevation you're at. Here where we live, we use 10 pounds of weight, so after 10 minutes I put on the weight at 10 pounds. And then I turn my stove down and wait until I hear this weight jiggle about 1 to 4 times in a minute. Now after you've canned for a little while, you'll know exactly at what temperature your stove needs to be at to hear the jiggle within that 1 to 4 times in a minute range. For me on our stove, I know that's just above number 4 on my biggest element. Now once the weight starts to jiggle, I start a timer and just make sure how many times it jiggles and stops and then jiggles again within 1 minute. Now you can start counting the processing time from the first jiggle as long as you're sure that it is jiggling within 1 to 4 times in that minute. Again, that's for my pressure canner, so you should make sure you read your manual and see when you can start counting your own processing time. You can adjust the heat on your stove until the pressure regulator weight jiggles only 1 to 4 times per minute. And the processing time will be dependent on elevation, what recipe you're making, and if you want more information, you should check out the FDA website and follow their guidelines there. For my elevation, processing time for broth is 30 minutes. If at any point the weight stops jiggling and doesn't jiggle again, you'll have to start all over again, and somehow the heat and pressure has gotten adjusted and needs to be corrected and start all over again. Now when the timer runs up, when the food is cooked for the proper pressure time for the amount of time it needed to, you can turn off the heat source and then wait until that pressure comes all the way down to 0. For us, this takes about half an hour or around there. I wait until that dial comes all the way down, and then I take off the weight and I set my timer for 2 minutes and wait for that final steam to just release. After 2 minutes, I use a cloth to loosen all of the knobs so that I can take off the lid. Be very careful, the steam will be very hot, so you want to be real careful when you lift off the lid. And find a place that you can put this hot lid. Now these jars are very hot, and so I'm using one of these canning jar lifters to move my jars to an area that I've prepared with some cloth, and then I'm going to let them cool over here for night. And now I'm going to leave these jars to cool out here overnight, and then tomorrow I'll come back, clean them off, take off the lids, and label them. Alright, now this is the next day. These are my jars. They look wonderful. I'm super pleased with how they turned out. You can see the salmon is nicely cooked and some liquid has come out that naturally released from the fish as it cooked. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean off my jars. They're usually a bit dirty. And I'm just doing this so that I can clearly label with a Sharpie on the lids. I want to label by including the name and the date so that I know whenever I pull out a jar I can see what's in it, which should be obvious, but when you can a lot that may not be the case. And then the most important thing for me is the date, so I know how long these have been sitting. It's not so much for is this still safe to eat. I think canned goods can be eaten for several years. But what it's really for is just for me to know if I am canning more of something, which to eat first, because of course over time quality in all food will slowly, decrease, and so I want to eat the things that we've canned the longest ago, the sooner than new things, as we do with all foods. So I'm labeling all of these jars, and then I'm actually removing these screw top lids. This is to make sure that all of the jars got a really good seal. You'll see me holding onto the lids, testing each one, and this is where I'll be able to tell if, the seal wasn't that good or is broken in any one. We want to eat those right away and not save them at all. They will not be shelf stable, and so this is a really good way to do that, taking off all of the ring tops. And then I'm giving the rest of the jar a really good wipe down before packing it away into our cupboard. I'm saving all of my canned goods into our corner cupboard here. We don't actually have a separate pantry, and so I'm just using this corner cupboard, which we don't actually go into very often. It's a little uncomfortable to bend down here, but I save all of our canned goods down here in a sort of organized fashion. And you'll see here is some of the broth that I've already canned. So I'm saving all of these here and looking forward to adding a lot more jars here as we go into a new gardening season. And I'm excited to have some food shelf stable that we can just pull off the rack and quickly heat up for meals or lunches anytime. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you have found it useful, would you consider liking? That is a big help to us. And if you would subscribe to our channel, you can catch some of our upcoming content. Alright, see you. Bye!